Hello and welcome back. 2 videos in 1 month. Who am I? Anyway, a few videos ago, somebody had requested a talk about being non-judgmental and how I became non-judgmental and how to be a non-judgmental therapist. And shout out to Lincoln Butler. So this video is going to be a brief little video about the non-judgmentalness that I have found within myself. And I wanted to thank that viewer for giving me the opportunity to reflect on myself, how I operate as a person, how I operate as a therapist, and really think about my own motivations and about how I approach the work that I do and why I approach the work the way that I do. And so I wanted to start off with my background. So I didn't grow up in the most functional family. Most therapists, I would say, do not. And so that was part of where the non-judgmentalness came in. And I grew up hanging out with people. I had a very interesting way of moving in the world. So my family life was not the most stable, so I got along very well with other kids whose families' lives weren't that stable. I also did very, very well in school. So my grades were very high, and I was often in gifted classes and honors classes and AP classes. So I lived in these 2 different worlds. I lived in a world with kids that got in trouble, kids that had difficult home lives, kids that got in trouble. And I always remember, even when I think it was in 6th grade, where I would get in trouble because I would talk and talk and talk and talk and talk. Surprise, surprise, surprise. And I had to sit next to the teacher's desk because I distracted everybody. So I would often get in trouble and wind up having to do detention or be separated from the class. So even though I did really, really well academically, I wasn't the best behaviorally. So I often spent time with the kids that also got in trouble. So I wouldn't do my homework and I would have to stay after, or I'd have to stay in for lunch. And so I'd be around the kids that also did those things. And I didn't shut up ever. And so I would have to sit next to the teacher, or I would get in trouble, or I'd have to stay after for talking and talking and talking. And I remember in 6th grade, I had to sit next to the teacher, and I had to sit next to the kid that had the severe ADHD that he couldn't pay attention. So I really got along with him. That was my homeboy in that class. So here I am in my reading class, being in the highest reading class, being in the highest math class, and then for my homeroom class, I was next to the most ADHD kid getting in trouble because the class was boring. So I would just do things that often put me in contact with kids that struggled both academically and behaviorally. Me, it was just behaviorally. I was just on and popping. And even in high school, once again, I hung out with a lot of the kids that got into trouble when they were outside of school, and because that's what I was more familiar with. And then in school, I hung out with more of the other kids that were in the honors classes. I would say by my senior year of high school, my close friends had mostly dropped out, and I still had a lot of my school friends, but a lot of my not school friends wound up leaving high school and either going to what we call the Flashlight Academy or just dropping out of school. I also had a lot of friends in high school that they got arrested, they got into a lot of trouble, suspensions. So I always just walked and lived in 2 different worlds. And I think that really helped with the non-judgmental aspect, because these have been my friends. These have been people that I didn't feel that I was any different. And I often say, like, my life motto really needs to be, by the grace of God go I, because a lot of the things that I was doing, I could have gotten in big trouble for. I also had doing really, really well academically as a protective factor that kept me out of trouble. I also had teachers and other adults that would step in and kind of mitigate some of the harm that could potentially happen to me, give me words of encouragement, keep me on track, things like that. I also worked a lot when I was an adolescent, a lot of work. And so I had relationships at work with my managers that they would also keep me in line. There's also too, just for my personality type, I did my little big five, and with my big five, it turns out I have the characteristics of being very open to new experiences. So I have sort of this desire to learn more, to figure out more, this curiosity, this creativity that really helps me with the non-judgmentalness. So when people come in with problematic behaviors, or they've gotten in trouble, or they've done things that other people might judge them for, I have more curiosity than judgment about it. I'm more curious about why this behavior exists, what occurred to cause this behavior, what part of this person led this behavior to be problematic. And for me, that level of curiosity, if I was judgmental, I wouldn't be able to figure all that out. People would shut down and I wouldn't get the tea, I wouldn't get the story. And so really having this non-judgmentalness as part of my personality makes it where I'm really excited to hear about how people think and feel. And if I'm judgmental, if they shut down, then I don't get to hear everything that's going on. I often say with my clients that fall more with ASPD, BPD, I want to take more care of them. NPD, my impulse is to kind of challenge more. With ASPD and some of the behaviors that come up for that, it is just something that I'm very curious about. Why does their brain work that way? What's going on with them? And I even had this book that helps you identify the reasons for being a therapist. And I really resonated the most with problem solving. I find that people, when they present with these issues, I find it where they're suffering. They don't want to suffer. I have a great amount of empathy where I don't want them to suffer as well. And I have a lot of curiosity, lots and lots of curiosity about what is going on. What are the behaviors standing in the way of them living a life that they would really love to live? How their brain works differently, how we can modify those differences so that way they stay out of trouble, they do the things that they want to do, they live a life that they're actually happy in. And so it's a lot of that curiosity just doesn't allow for there to be judgmentalness. Now, we talked about judgmentalness this morning in consultation team, and I just talked to the intern and my employee right before this about how there are these big parts of me that are judgmental, and they're judgmental in a way where I'm not judging if they're good or bad just from an objective perspective. I'm looking at behaviors, whether or not they're getting somebody closer to the goal that they have or further away from the goal. And so there's just these judgments of discernment, of figuring out whether or not something is healthy or harmful, if it's something that somebody wants in their life. If this behavior, if you say that you want friends and then you are not taking a shower and smelling up the room, that's something where judgment needs to come in, but not like, oh my God, what is wrong with you for not taking a shower? It's more like, okay, what is standing in the way of you not taking the shower if you want friends? Because if you want friends are going to not want to be around somebody that's stinky. And so it's less a judgment about like the stinkiness aspect. It's more a judgment about, okay, well, if you say that you have this goal and then you do this behavior, like they're not compatible. So judgment shows up, and I often say too, judgment shows up in my personal life about who I have in my personal life, how I relate to different people and the struggles that they have. Now, I do a lot of work in my professional life, and I work with some difficult topics, some difficult things, and if I didn't protect my peace more in my personal life, I wouldn't be able to do what I do in my professional life. So I tend to have more rigid limits, and it's not where I judge people for either being good or bad or doing the right thing or the wrong thing or anything like that. It's more, what do I want to deal with in my personal life? What are the problems that I'm willing to deal with? What do my limits and boundaries look like? And so judgment shows up in that respect, but not in a way where I think that I'm better or less than. It's more, do I want to deal with this or do I not want to deal with this? Do I want this problem or do I not want this problem? And I'm not saying that because somebody has problems or issues that they're not a worthwhile person or don't deserve friends or any of this other stuff. It's more where I'm tired and I don't want to deal with it. And that's in my personal life. And one last thing before I sum this up, I think one of the most helpful things that I keep in the back of my mind is a friend of mine. She and her family knew what my family's background was and knew the struggles that I'd been through, knew all these different parts of me and how I was created. And the mama, Shelly, she said to me when I got my master's degree, she said, don't ever forget that where you came from. Don't ever think that you're ever better than any of the people that you're ever going to work with, because you're not. And some people might take that as like, well, damn, that's some negative. I took it as, you are absolutely right. This degree does not make me better than anybody else. I am just another human, being human on this planet, and I work with other humans being human on this planet. And I remember that I'm no better than anybody else. And it's always interesting to me because I'll have people that come in that they'll be like, especially interns, where they're like, oh, you've been doing this for blah, 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 blah. And it's like, yeah, so it doesn't matter. I'm a human, you're a human. There are things that you're going to bring in that are going to be fantastic that I've never thought about. And there's going to be parts of me that you see that you're going to be like, damn, she's allowed to talk to people because I'm a human. And I think I hopefully answered that question. And if I didn't, please give me feedback. Please like, subscribe, and share. If the people that know me in my personal life know that I'm working harder on this channel because I am trying to put together an online program through one of the platforms for people that are incarcerated, and I'm still sending in books, and I would love for my YouTube to be able to support that. But I'm going to do another video on that. I hope that this gave you some insight, and I hope that some clinicians can figure out, use this as a jumping off point about where they get their non-judgmentalness, where they might need to work on that part of it.